Well, around 300 Russian soldiers have advanced on the Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk through a blanket of thick fog. Now, that's according to the Ukrainian military. An eerie video, you see it right here, posted to social media, appears to show Russian troops moving into the city alongside it as part of a key supply route for Ukraine. There have been fierce battles for the territory in recent months, but Russia says its assault units are advancing, though the date of the footage cannot be independently verified. The road layout, the signs, and the thick fog match the conditions currently in Pokrovsk. All right, I want to bring in our correspondent now, Nick Connolly, who is in Kyiv. Nick, good to see you. You know, people on social media have been describing their arrival, the Russians' arrival, as a scene out of a Mad Max movie, not in the desert, rather in the fog. What do these images tell us about the kind of fighting that is going on in Pokrovsk?
I think these are very unusual images because normally if there weren't those foggy conditions, then you would have drones attacking those people very fast. So they wouldn't be walking around at that pace and seemingly in such a kind of relaxed state as they are on that video. That is really a very unusual thing to see so many troops together, moving so slowly, some of them on foot, some of those on motorbikes and in pickups. I think the other really important thing that you see from that perspective, rather than the normal kind of bird's eye view that you would get from drone shots, is that basically the Russians are not using armored personnel carriers, partly because they've used them all up. So many of them have been destroyed by drone attacks in this war that they are now resorting to this kind of civilian technology. I think it's important to clarify that that number 300, that refers to the total number of Russian troops estimated in Pokrovsk right now by the Ukrainians. That's a number that's been doing the rounds for the last few days. The number of people we see walking in there is significantly lower, but certainly it is the case that Russia is pushing everything it has at Pokrovsk and trying to get as many people in to see if they can take the city.
Well, Nick, do we know how close is Russia to taking all of Pokrovsk?
So I think it's worth kind of dividing this up, and if people will take a moment to look at the map, there is a next door town that is still in Ukrainian hands, which is not as well known, Mirnohrad, which is basically surrounded on three sides by Russian control. It is just a couple of kilometers to the east, but really there is only a small kind of neck of Ukrainian controlled territory, which they're trying to reinforce that connects it to the rest of Ukrainian held land. Pokrovsk is more kind of on the edge of Russian control, and so there are more roads out, more options to get out. It has been looking that way over the last few days, that this is now a matter of days or weeks, but equally we have been wrong before. Fighting in urban environments where you've got lots of high-rises to hide in, lots of tunnels, lots of basements, can take weeks and months. We saw the same in Avdiivka and Bakhmut, where this really dragged on and on. It's a lot harder to fight in those kind of urban environments than it is out in the open fields.
And Nick, if Ukraine were to lose Pokrovsk, what would that mean for its overall war effort?
I think right now it feels like this is more kind of important for the Russian side than it is for the Ukrainian side in terms of Vladimir Putin having something to show for a year of huge losses on the Russian side. We were talking about Pokrovsk potentially falling at the end of last year, and here we are. It is still at least partially in Ukrainian hands, and I think he's desperate for a kind of PR win on that side. It was more important in the past for Ukraine when there was a kind of Ukrainian-controlled hinterland to the south and the east of Pokrovsk, and Pokrovsk was the kind of logistical hub for that. But now that territory is gone. Pokrovsk has lost importance, but there is obviously the expectation that once it falls into Russian hands, then Russia's forces, Russia's efforts will shift to the north, to Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, those two main Ukrainian-held cities in Donetsk region, because after all, we know that Putin wants to take all of Donetsk region and then come back to the White House, or at least in his talks to Donald Trump, and say, look, I've got it all, time for the Ukrainians to sign it all over to me.
Our very own Nick Connolly with the latest from Kyiv. Nick, as always, thank you.
That's DW correspondent Nick Connolly in Kyiv. We'll get more on this from military analyst Marina Miron from the Defence Studies Department at King's College London. Welcome, Marina. What do you see when you see these images?
Good evening, Phil. Well, what we're seeing is that the thick fog is preventing the Ukrainian armed forces from using drones, or rather the drones wouldn't be able to see anything. And it seems like the soldiers are quite relaxed, meaning they don't count on any possible attack from any direction. So it looks like they would be in control of whichever territory it is and of the surrounding areas. So it displays a degree of safety on the part of the Russian soldiers.
Right, but Ukraine acknowledges that Russian troops are in the city. They say, though, Russia isn't in control of the city. How long do you think that will last?
Well, Russia is not in control of the city. What I was referring to is that specific area where that image or that video is coming from. Now, what is happening in Pokrovsk is that the Russians are in the city and are creating little islands and are trying to isolate Ukrainian troops. And the Ukrainian troops have been reporting for a while that they are outnumbered, that they are being outnumbered. So no, there is no full control of the city. However, the Russians are controlling all the supply routes to the city, making it difficult for Ukrainians to evacuate casualties and, of course, to supply troops, which is much more important.
And how much of a setback is that for Ukraine?
It is a huge setback, and the Ukrainian military command, when speaking to President Zelensky, said that they would take the decision on when to withdraw from Pokrovsk, meaning that they probably realize the seriousness of the situation and the fact that the troops in Pokrovsk, and not only those in Pokrovsk, but to the east of Pokrovsk, there is Mironograd. There, the troops would be surrounded. So if you look at the map, there is a little pocket, and it is being kind of surrounded by the Russian-controlled areas. And so if Pokrovsk, or when Pokrovsk falls, because it looks like it is a matter of maybe a week or maybe even less, given the situation on the ground, the Ukrainian troops there will be surrounded. And the problem now is, how do you get them out safely? And when should you start getting them out, given that the supply is being cut off and that the Russians are almost in control of Pokrovsk?
And explain to us the importance of this city that Russia has described as the gateway to the whole Donetsk region.
Well, that is correct. The city is indeed a very important city from a logistical perspective. It's a logistical node, and it is the logistical node that helps, or used to help at least until recently, supply Ukrainian troops in the Donbass and specifically east of Pokrovsk. There are roads that are going to Slavansk and Kramatorsk, for instance, and the city is good to be used as a fortress. It is elevated, and most importantly, behind the city, according to Ukrainian reports, the Russians could just march through towards the west because there are no defensive lines, because the city is one of those fortress belt cities, which is the main line of defense of the Ukrainian troops. And of course, taking the city for the Russians will give them different vectors which they can use to develop their offensive, including Dnipropetrovsk, Pavlograd, including Kramatorsk and Slavansk, and including also Zaporizhia. So there are many directions where they can go from this city to develop their offensive.
Thanks, as ever, Marina Miron from King's College London.
Thank you for having me.